started with our talk today. This is Katia Moskowicz with Wired magazine, and she's going to be giving us a great presentation about communication between scientists and journalists. Let's all welcome Katia.
Thank you, Jill, and hello, everybody. So yes, I work at Wired. I'm based in London, so this is me filming in the Atacama Desert. I mostly cover science, a little bit of technology, and before Wired, I used to work at the BBC for quite some time, and Nature magazine as well. And I used to freelance for a bunch of other publications, like science and scientists and stuff. And I also actually have a physics degree, so I'm a scientist as well, so I'm kind of know both worlds. And I'll talk today. Hopefully we're going to have a lively discussion afterwards as well, so please do prepare your questions. Yeah, so as we all know, science does need supporters. It constantly has to argue its case and to justify its existence to the layperson. Scientists, of course, are really great in writing papers and publishing them, but people do need to know about the discoveries because, you know, science needs funding, right? And you guys need international recognition as well. And it's also important to kind of nurture the next generation of scientists, to attract them to whatever university the research is coming from. Talent is incredibly important as well. Unfortunately, a lot of science gets lost to the public because it just stays in journals, or you know, it gets onto the archive and stays there, and nobody knows. So journalists need to know where they can find great science. Not many of them will go on the archive or even know what it is. They will know a few major journals, but they will have difficulty navigating and understanding what's important and what's not. So, you know, this is what happens, right? In science journals quite often. Journalists, even if they are science journalists, often don't have the basic level of understanding of what you guys are writing about. Say, especially in physics, it may, could be very often quite confusing. So when you engage with the media, you have to always remember that you're talking to a layperson and try to eliminate jargon if possible. But it's important to know that, of course, there are sloppy journalists very often, and those who want clicks, but also errors in science reporting very often arise when the media is confused, right? And confused because they didn't understand the paper, they didn't understand the press release, they didn't understand the scientists that are talking to on the phone. So, it's always important to remember that when you're talking to a journalist, you're actually not really talking to the journalist, you're talking to the audience of that publication. And if it's, Fox News, it will be very different from the audience of Scientific American, obviously, so you have to prepare and still, don't use jargon, but you have to explain things a little bit more in detail if you're talking to, say, Fox rather than a science publication. What I know from working with scientists and writing for example, very often I write for Quanta magazine, and 90% of Quanta readership are scientists, but I know for a fact that even if I write, say, on something very specific, like dark matter or whatever, and if you are a scientist working in that area, you will still not know everything I'm talking about because you're not part of the research team. So even for Quanta, I have to explain everything. Okay. And one thing important to remember is that ultimately journalists want only one thing. They want to tell a good story. And their reputation is also on the line, so they're not deliberately trying to introduce mistakes. Of course, in many cases, if it's again, I'm using Fox as an example, or it could be a wonderful publication we have in the UK called the Daily Mail, as you may have heard of. Obviously, journalists there are not particularly great when it comes to accuracy, and they will always try to spin stories to get more attention, to get more clicks. But ultimately, at least what we are taught in journalism schools, we want to get a good story out, right, for our audiences and to be accurate. So what can we do then? Scientists, I think, have two options. They can either, give journalists all the facts and allow them to define the story the way they want, or they can seize the initiative and kind of help the journalists craft the story together with the scientists, even if the journalists will not suspect that this is what they're doing. So, what do I mean by that? Well, here I'm using theoretical physics as an example, but of course any physics or astronomy or whatever is very difficult for the media to understand. There are their equations and concepts and theories and whatever. And so what we need to do, what you guys need to do when you speak into the media is to tell the story upside down. What do I mean by that? And this is what we're taught in journalism school. It's something called inverted pyramid. It's the first thing journalism students get introduced to when writing stories, and this is what you all have to think about. So when you're writing your papers, of course what you do, well, let's forget about the abstract, but the actual paper is first context and the background, and then you talk about your research and how you got there, and then finally you give the results, right, at the very end. Well, you have to flip it around, and you have to first tell what the story is in like the first 2 sentences, and then you have to give like a quick summary, and then the rest of the story. Why? Because when the reader reads the story, and maybe next time you read a story in the newspaper or online, just pay attention to that, and you'll see that, very often you don't read the whole story if you're not interested, but even if you are interested but you're short for time, you will always try to read the first couple of paragraphs and then you move on, right, especially online. So this is how any journalist will think. And this is how, when you're talking about your story, this is how you have to present it to them, and this is how press officers also have to write the press releases, and they actually sometimes don't get it right either. When you prepare to talk to a journalist, you also have to, think, is there a news spec? So, for example, you're about to put a paper out, then you have to think what else has been written about it, and how can I, even if it's like an incremental discovery, how can I make it so that it's interesting to a much, much broader audience and not just people, your immediate colleagues, for example. And so what I suggest people do, and that's actually, again, a journalism technique, the pub approach. Have you ever heard of that? So, okay, great. So basically, if you're in a pub or a bar or whatever with your friends who are not stupid, okay, they're clever people, but they might be clever in their own, it might be a medical doctor or, a football player, I don't know, but they're still very clever, they're your friends, right? So, and you really want to impress them, you really want to tell them about your research. How do you do it? And you have to get their attention in the first, 3 minutes holding a beer. This is it. So imagine you're talking to a friend, and then that's how you're going to be talking to a journalist calling you once your story is out. You have to tell them what it is. Or maybe it's actually a paper that you published, but you only put it on archive, and you know that there's not going to be a press release, and then it's your job, and very often scientists don't know that, but you can approach the journalist, and they will be very grateful if you do, and all the journalists are on Twitter, for example. You just drop them a line, and say, I know you work at Scientific American, I've just written this brilliant paper, and it's important because, X, Y, and Z. And then I'm pretty sure they will, if indeed they get interested, they will write about it. So, but you just have to make sure you get your point across. And just to give you an example, like I have a good friend of mine, it's a classmate from high school, so we kind of lost touch, and then I found out that he moved to Germany, and he's a biophysicist in Germany, and he wrote to me, so I was at Nature at the time, and he wrote to me on Facebook, and he said, we just published a paper and it's so great. And I nearly fell asleep. I couldn't understand what the hell he was talking about. It was something about cells and cells dying, and it was like, oh my god. Okay, and so, but because I knew him, right, so I kind of made this extra effort to get back to him, and I said, look, can you tell me about your paper, but like, just, pretend that I'm your, I don't know, your girlfriend you're trying to impress, just tell me normally, like a normal, like, I don't understand what you're saying. And then he wrote again, and then I understood that his paper was actually really cool. It was like, indeed, about how to prevent cells from dying using this, whatever technique they were using. And so if you think about the context, and this is what you mentioned, it could be used for Alzheimer research, or, to help people not to age so quickly, or whatever. And then it made sense, and so that was a completely different type of story. But had he been not a friend, but just a random person emailing me with a pitch like that, I definitely would not go back to him, and it will be a loss for me, for the audiences, and for him as well. So anyway, and of course your paper, whatever you're working on, doesn't have to be a major breakthrough, because journalists are not stupid and they do understand incremental advances as well. So you just, again, you have to put it in a broader context and tell them why it's significant. Basically just like what I did right now with the cells example. You might know this guy, that's John Ellis, he works at CERN. Anyway, just put the picture there because I love his office. He was actually moved from that office because of safety. So, anyway, he's brilliant. Just to let you know that what, again, many scientists don't know is that quotes, the questions won't be shared before the interview, so please don't ask, because you'll just put them off and then not going to talk to you. Questions will not be shared, and you will not get quotes for approval. You will not get to read the article afterwards. So again, please don't ask. It's simply unethical. It's not because journalists are trying to be mean, but just imagine if you're talking to the journalist is interviewing Trump or any other politician, and then has to submit the article for approval, and the press office, Trump's press office is going to fiddle with the quotes. That's exactly the same thing. Then it's not journalism anymore. So this is why journalists will not give you their drafts for approval. However, there's a way around it. You can suggest very, politely, by the way, if you want me to help you to get your facts right, I'm here to help on the phone, by email, if you want me to fact check your text or fact check your quotes or whatever. This is a completely different situation. You're not ordering them to show you the text, you're asking to help. And I've been in a situation many times, and I know scientists who are incredibly media savvy and who do that, and I'm grateful, because obviously I don't want to make mistakes, and I'm not an expert in whatever area I'm writing about necessarily, and I don't want, stupid mistakes to then appear in print for the whole world to see. It's my byline, right? So I want to avoid it. So of course I will use their help, and depending on how strict the editorial rules are in the publication, it could indeed be just on the phone that I could read the quote back to them and say, I'm paraphrasing your quote. Is that correct? Or I can even send them a few paragraphs by email to fact check. So this is totally possible and happens all the time, but it just depends how you phrase it. Okay, so as I already mentioned kind of before, sources of mistakes. It could be from scientists or press officers overstating, overinflating the findings, and thankfully not very often, but there are scientists who are fraudulent, so that happens as well. Misleading quotes, what I mean by that is usually, again, jargon, so the journalist doesn't understand what he's listening back to the recording, and the quote is too complicated, so they paraphrase it, they may get it wrong. Press officers spinning stories. Of course, there could be just obviously journalists who just don't get the science at all, or who are under pressure, under time pressure. There are obviously plenty of journalists who want to get more clicks, and and then there are sub-editors headline editors for writing. Actually, usually it's not the writer who gets the headline. Very often it's completely out of their hands. So if the headline doesn't reflect the story, this is something that is usually edited at the very end, right before it's published on the website. And again, that person can get it wrong simply because they're trying to summarize the whole piece in 5 words, and they may not know, and that's sad, and the writer has to then try and get it right, especially if there is a mistake. But there could be some editors actually rewording the copy right before they publish it, and again, this is not something that the original journalist actually submitted, but there might be mistakes. So what can you do about it if that happens? Oh yeah, before I talk about that, just I've seen some research where 72% of readers actually just literally take the quotes from the press release that lands in their inbox. So the press officers really have to be careful what they put in there, but also what's quite important I find is that you guys work with press officers, right? So you better really make sure that once it's signed off, it's completely correct and not overstating anything, not over-exaggerating any of your research. Because then journalists, very often if they're pressed for time, they will not even give you a call, they'll just take it directly from the press release. And so it better be right. But yeah, so what can you then do to make sure this doesn't happen? You have to watch what you release. Yeah, as I just said with the press release, this is very important. You have to be available. So yeah, so you put a story, you put your paper out, and it's published, and the journalist might or might not know that it's been published. Maybe they received a press release or your paper on the embargo a few days ago or whatever. But don't disappear. Don't go on vacation the day your paper is published, because the journalist will call you. And what's happening actually now more and more often in many newsrooms is that they will not call the lead author. So even though on the press release it's, this person is available for comment, and it's usually the lead author, and it's usually a guy, okay? But many newsrooms are trying to get more women to quote, and so they will call, they will look at the 5 names on the paper, and they will call the woman on the paper, and the woman will say, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't talk to you right now, I'm so busy, and hang up the phone, and because, she wants you to go to the lead author. But then the journalist will be pissed off, upset, and probably just take some stuff from the press release and not talk to anybody. So I think you have to be a bit more confident if you're not the lead author. You don't have to be the woman, of course, but just anybody on the paper. So basically my point is, the journalist can call anyone, any of the authors, and talk to them, because otherwise, if you don't, they may introduce mistakes, because they will not understand what the heck your research is about. Yeah, be prepared. So of course, media training courses are very expensive, but you can just read up online, and how to talk to journalists. There's plenty of material. Just try to, and you can do the pub test, is very good. You have to think big. So, researchers must accept that accuracy is quite relative. And if you think that some particular detail of your research is incredibly important, the journalist may not think it is, because they maybe only have 500 words for your story. And so you really, if it is so vital, you have to explain to them why it's vital. But more often than not, you just have to think big and really think whether that particular detail of the research is important in a broader context of the, especially if the story, again, not for a science publication, but for mass media or whatever some commercial outlet. Think social. What I mean by that is that there are plenty of opportunities to use blogs, to use Twitter, and I know many scientists are reluctant to do that, but I think it's really important simply because journalists will, if they don't have time or they don't reach you on the phone, they can always go on your blog or on your Twitter and see and get some information from there for the article they're working on. Or they can connect with you on Twitter, maybe if they don't have your phone number. And yeah, just basically you have to be prepared. You have to have your key facts at hand, because journalists may only have 5 minutes to talk to you. So if you say, oh my God, wait, I have to go through the paper to get that number, then it's just, usually better to have it with you. what if things do go wrong? So very often scientists will just go ballistic and like, oh my god, this stupid journalist got it wrong again, science journalism sucks, I hate all of them, whatever. But don't do that, okay? Of course things can go wrong, and if it's TV or print, you may not do much, you may not be able to do much, but if it's online, and you see a mistake, pick up the phone or email the writer, not the editor, don't call the newsroom, or contact them on Twitter. All journalists, as I said before, like have their Twitter accounts. I guarantee you they will be extremely grateful if they misspelled your name, if they put the wrong number, if they misquoted you or whatever. They will be really grateful that you're pointing it out because they don't want other people to see their mistakes. And they will correct it straight away, even if it's the weekend or late at night. You know, definitely. I mean, I would. So, and also, you know, there's lots of fake news out there, pseudoscience. So if you see a story that is not about your research, but is in your field, and you know that they got it wrong, again, do alert them, please, because then they will know you, they will be able to contact you again later, and maybe talk about your research, and they will just be really grateful that you've alerted them to a mistake. So, yeah, that's it. So, any questions?